Last lecture, I identified the fundamental attribution error. And the fundamental attribution error is when we judge others, we tend to attribute their behavior to their character. So if they act kind, we think they're a kind person. If they are irritable, we think, well, they're a grumpy person. And we witness them giving something to someone, they're a generous person, that kind of thing. On the other hand, in judging ourselves, we tend to attribute our own behavior, if it misses the mark, to the situation. There are other factors that interfered with me doing the things that I should have done better. So we tend not to blame ourselves so much, but we blame the situation when judging ourselves. But when we look at other people's behavior, we tend to judge their behavior as a factor of their character, the kind of person that they are. And I review that for you because we're going to be looking at the Good Samaritan parable, and we're going to be looking at a study that tested out this kind of common sense moral that came up through the story of the Good Samaritan. So this was a story from the Bible, and I'll read it to you. A man was traveling along a road between two cities. He was robbed, seriously wounded, and left half dead on the road. Three men came across him. The first was a priest or a rabbi who passed him by without helping. The second was a Levite, someone who studied Jewish law, so kind of like a common day contemporary lawyer. And he also passed by without helping. The third man was a Samaritan. Samaritans in biblical day, New Testament days, were from a very low social status group, and they were kind of looked down on socially by other people. He had compassion on the man. He stopped, bound up his wounds, and carried him off to an inn to take care of him. And he actually paid the innkeeper to keep him there and nurse him back to health until he was well. So what is the moral of this story? Well, we kind of judge the priest and the Levite as being not so good people. Okay, they're selfish, uncaring, and dispassionate because of their behavior of passing by the person that needed help. The Samaritan is judged to be more compassionate, caring, and unselfish. So we judge the Samaritan as being a better person in comparison to the priest and Levite. Now, Darley and Batson in 1973 designed an experiment. They wanted to kind of test the assumption that these first men that passed by were so bad. They wanted to see if maybe perhaps there were other factors that played into their behavior, or that possibly there was a situation we didn't know about. So they came up with kind of a hypothetical situation in which there might be a reason for somebody to ignore someone else that was in need of help. And they staged the experiment at the Princeton Theological Seminary. The experiment was set up so that seminary students were asked to give a talk about the Good Samaritan story to a big audience. And as the students were on their way to give the talk, they had two different conditions. One condition was a no time pressure, where they simply walked into the auditorium and gave their talk. The other condition was they were walking along, but as they were walking along, someone was staged there. It was part of the experiment, a Confederate that told them, "You're really late, you need to hurry up. They're waiting for you," that kind of thing. So that created a sense of time pressure. Now, for both of those conditions, there were, as the students walked to the auditorium, there was a man laying down, clutching their heart, acting like they were in need of assistance. And the idea here, the experiment, was to see whether or not the seminary students who are actually giving a talk on the Good Samaritan would stop on their way to give their speech. So that was one form of one part of the design. They also looked at, they wanted to see if there was a difference between students that looked at religion as a means towards personal salvation versus students that were more likely to frame religion as being a means towards having moral and spiritual values. It turned out, of course, the dependent variable was whether or not the seminary students stopped and tried to assist the people on the way to the talk. So the results were as expected, as hypothesized. The people that experienced time pressure were much less likely to stop, and they were likely to just ignore the person and go on their way to give their talk. There didn't seem to be any difference between how students framed their motivation to study religion at all. So the idea here is that we can be influenced by situational factors, and time pressure is hypothetically something that could influence a person's behavior and their willingness to help someone. And that when we judge other people, we should consider whether or not there are situational factors that could be feeding into their behavior. So if situational influences can stop us from being the best person that we can be, how can we control for that? Well, one way is through channel factors. So channel factors are defined as situational circumstances that appear unimportant, but they can have great consequences for behavior. They can either facilitate behavior, make it more likely it'll happen, block it so it's less likely that it'll happen. It could guide behavior in a certain direction. It can help shape behaviors and help people to follow through with their plans and commitments. So a couple of studies that looked at this in 1965, Leventhal, Singer, and Jones educated students about the importance about getting their tetanus boosters, and actually had many students commit to getting a tetanus shot, but following through was a problem for them. So when they looked at how many students actually followed through, it was really a low percentage when they just asked them to commit to it. But when they were given a map to the clinic and they were asked to look at their schedule and commit to a time that they could go to the clinic, then they were much more likely to carry through with that commitment. So if we kind of set the smaller goals along the way towards the larger goal, those channel factors channel the behavior to the desired goal. Another study was done in 2009 by Chow, Leibson, and Madrian, and then another by Madrian and Shea in back in 2001 that looked at how to encourage people to opt for their retirement program, because not enough people were signing up, and it was actually to people's detriment in doing that. So they started looking at how the form that they filled out was designed. So instead of opting in by checking a box, they changed that so that they would have to check out. So they changed the form from having to opt in to they were automatically opted in to have the retirement count, unless they checked another box that opted out. And they had a lot more people signing up for retirement programs in that way. So we can control for situational influences, things that might get in the way of keeping us do the things we want to do, or others, by building in these steps along the way, and directing behavior, and also just through sequencing different behaviors towards the desired goal. Another thing that influences our interpretation of people's behavior, besides the fundamental attribution error, is the role of construal. So construal is a personal interpretation of the stimuli or situations people confront, or their interpretation of people's behavior. It's how we interpret reality. And I'd like you to, it really involves our perceptual abilities. If you've taken Psychology 101, if you remember back studying sensation and perception, a lot of times, maybe not a lot of times, but sometimes when we perceive reality, we're not getting the exact form of reality that is out there in the world, because we have these filters through which we experience the world. So take a look at the image on the left lower side of the frame here, and tell me what you see. Is it a woman's face, or is it Bill Clinton playing the saxophone? Depending on which way you look at it, which part of the picture is figure and which is ground, you can see either or both. That's kind of an example of construal, how you see something, how you judge something. A concept closely related to construal are schemas. You've probably learned about schemas before, and here it's defined by our authors as a knowledge structure consisting of any organized body of stored information. And a knowledge structure, my dog is barking in the background, and I don't know if you can hear it. Sorry about that. My dog sweetheart, Bree, was barking, and I didn't know if you could hear it or not. And probably sometime in one of these lectures you'll meet sweetheart Bree, because she likes to come in and sit on my lap sometimes in the office. But getting back to schemas, schemas are also really the same thing as a knowledge structure, or organized packets of information that we store in memory. I like to use the example, when I explain schemas, I like to use the lifesaver example. So when you think of lifesavers, you think of, you know, all of the flavors of lifesavers fit into the schema for what a lifesaver is. So there's cherry and orange and lemon and lime and butterscotch, and now they have, you know, all kinds of different flavors, tropical flavors. But anything that you have any flavor you've associated with lifesavers fit within that schema of what a lifesaver is. But in Australia, they have a musk flavored lifesaver. And for most Americans, when you ask them to imagine the flavor of musk, that does not fit into their schema of a candy at all, let alone the schema of a lifesaver. So kind of excludes the musk flavor from that schema for Americans, but not for Australians. So they have kind of a different schema for lifesavers than we do. Just as we classify things according to schemas, we classify humans, other humans, according to stereotypes. And I see that we are running short on time, so we will pick up on stereotypes in the next video segment. Thank you.